Could Scott Frost get off to a 3-0 start to start the 2025 season? I think so.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to the Locked On UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Turn us up, turn us on, we'll turn it out. We're here to talk a little UCF football today. We're going to talk about Scott Frost and his culture keepers, why I think UCF could start 3-0, and where do they finish if they get off to a fast start. Let's start at the top here, guys. Before we get started, let me just mention this segment is brought to you by our friends at GameTime, our title sponsor for today's show. If you want tickets, download the GameTime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I want to thank them for sponsoring this segment. Let's jump in here. Scott Frost throughout fall camp has talked about culture keepers, guys who he is leaning on to carry the flag for UCF in year one. Over 70 new players on this team. You've got to find leaders, not just in terms of stats or what they can produce, but you need leaders in the locker room, guys who are vocal, guys who carry the culture keepers, as he has coined it, that will be super important, I think, to setting the basis for what this program will be moving forward under him. Look, he's got to imprint his identity onto this squad. He's got to figure out, look, how do I get guys to buy in, and how do I get them to get other guys to buy in? Now, it seems like it's working. In my talks with Kane Archer and Dante Carr, guys are buying it. They are buying it. And they're not just buying money. Now, we know those talks are happening, but, when you talk to Dante Carr, you talk to Kane Archer, these guys are saying, look, man, we feel like if we just play our butts off, if we get the football part right, the money will take care of itself. Guys, in today's college football, I think that's probably going to be one of the more underrated skills a coach can show, is getting guys to come in and focus on football with money flying everywhere. Young men have now what seems like almost unlimited resources to focus on everything other than football. If you're Scott Frost and you can keep your team focused on football, I think it gives you a marked advantage over some of your peers in the conference. When your guys are focused, when they're in their playbook, when they're buying into the system, and other kids are distracted with their cars and their jewelry and whatever else kids are spending their money on these days, you can sneak a couple football games that nobody expects you to win. On paper, UCF has to close the talent gap with the top of the Big 12. They've just got to do it. There's no way around that. But until you get there, you can certainly sneak some wins that nobody expects you to get because you get these other things right. I'm looking forward to seeing what Scott Frost can do in that regard. He was so good at UCF the first go around. I want to remind you guys of a quote that he said. He said, when you're chasing happiness, and I'm paraphrasing here, sometimes they forget to tell you to just stop when you're happy. He is back in his happy place in Orlando. Now, he said some things in the media that I think he's gotten a lot of unfair flack for. But he gets it. I think he gets UCF. He gets the culture. He gets the fan base. He gets the alumni. Scott Frost gets it. Now, if his recruits get it, that's where I think UCF becomes dangerous, particularly in year one under this coach. The culture. Who are the culture keepers for UCF? Well, we talked about, I think, guys coming in that wide receiver room. He's talked about this wide receiver room a lot. He likes his wide receiver room. He thinks that they have a ton of potential. And I've got to agree with him. But you got guys like Chris Domerkamp, who I think adds, depth and experience to this wide receiver room. May not be the most talented guy, but I think he's going to be a culture keeper. Another guy that I'm keeping an eye on is DJ Black. And then you've got the transfers, Marcus Burke and Dwayne Thompson. Every guy I mentioned transferred in, but they're going to carry the culture for what this new version of UCF football is going to be. UCF fans died a slow death under Gus on the inside over his last year. It was awful. And I want to characterize that for you. We watched this team go after KJ Jefferson in the portal. We watched the last coach go after KJ Jefferson in the portal, bench him, and then get down to his fourth string quarterback without an injury. Unreal. The culture was terrible. They were evaluating at an awful level. They were picking the wrong guys. If you're UCF, you don't have as much money as some of your Big 12 peers. You don't have as much money as BYU. You can't afford to miss when you go out and spend a bunch of money in the portal on a QB. Now, I'm not sure UCF has a big-time QB on the roster right now, but we'll see. I'm open to being pleasantly surprised with what Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton can do what they have. Certainly, if you're looking for a culture keeper, you hope it's your quarterback. You hope it's that guy that has the biggest buy-in, because you can't afford for your quarterback not to be a leader. Reports are Fancher is doing really well in fall camp. Could the transfer emerge as a guy who helps steady the ship in year one? UCF is going to be in some dogfights this first season. Guys, they're going to be in some dogfights. And you need those culture keepers to step up in those moments and win you football games, because that's what it all boils down to. Yes, this is a rebuild, but I like what I'm hearing from Scott Frost. He wants to win now. He's preaching he can win now. And I'm telling you, while he understands that there's a certain amount of patience that needs to come along with a rebuild, he's not espousing to his guys that they can't win now. I love that from a coach. You guys have heard me say that a few times if you watch the show. A lot of coaches come in and they start talking about recruiting, and it becomes all about the guys who aren't even here yet. He is focused on the guys he has here now. But look, could that culminate in a hot start for UCF in year one? We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF, as I mentioned, is brought to you by our friends at GameTime. Guys, we've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where GameTime comes in. GameTime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as you get closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, low prices, guaranteed. What time is it, guys? It's game time. If you're UCF, you've got to get in the game, and you've got to get in the game fast. Now, we've talked about Jacksonville State, that first game. We're going to go through the first 3-game stretch here. A lot of you have hit the comment section. I appreciate the comments and the engagement always, and said, look, Mike G, we can't overlook Jacksonville State. Well, I don't think Scott Frost is overlooking anybody in this first year. But that first game will be about establishing your culture and establishing a tone for the season. Now, Scott Frost has said repeatedly that this battle for QB1 could go into game one. We may see multiple QBs in game one. I got to tell you, I am not in love with the idea of playing multiple QBs. I hope they get it worked out before game one. It's a tight competition. Now, a little bit of coach speak from Scott Frost when he says, look, we got 3 guys that we feel like we can do the job. No, you don't. There are maybe 2 guys in that room that can do it. And hopefully you got at least one guy who can do it. And that's where UCF was at last year. They didn't have one guy that could do it. But I think Jacksonville State is a win. I don't care what anybody says. No, they can't take that game lightly. But, in establishing your culture, you got to go out and you got to win games like this, and you need to win them decisively. You do. UCF should be able to run the ball and win this game. They should. I'm thinking that they can. But how much do they win this game by? By 10 points at least. UCF beats Jacksonville State by 10 points at least. And I think they figure out a lot of things. I can't wait to see this wide receiver room in game one. He's been effusive in his praise of his wide receiver room. A lot of new faces in that room. You lost your production at wide receiver, a lot of your production at wide receiver. But they went out and they feel like they picked the right guys to come in and fill the shoes of Kobe Hudson and company. So will that amount to points? Will UCF be able to move the ball? I think they will. I think we see something in the area of maybe 31-20 for game one while they're figuring out some things offensively. After that, you've got North Carolina A&T. This should be another win. Now, less worried about this game than I am about Jacksonville State, but this is another one where if you're UCF, you're using this game to dial it up, man, to figure out what you are as a football team. Figure out what you are as a football team before North Carolina. They say the biggest jump for any team comes between game one and game two. What are we going to learn about UCF between Jacksonville State and North Carolina A&T? We're going to learn about the Knights. Are they going to look poised? Are they going to look like they understand the system? Scott Frost described the adaptation to this new offense for some of the players like learning a new language. Are they going to look fluent in what he wants to do offensively by game two versus North Carolina A&T? The bounce house will be jumping. If you can get these two wins, I think you start to see a little bit of excitement building to what will be game three, which is where I want to spend most of the time. Feels like we spend a lot of time talking about game three this offseason. I promise we'll move on to other subjects in the next week or so as UCF enters game prep. But this North Carolina matchup stands out to me. You got North Carolina coming to your house, 3 straight home games to start your season. And if you're Scott Frost and you can win all 3, if you can beat Bill Belichick in game 3, we could see a boost to recruiting. We could see an influx of cash to the program as well, too. Coaching is going to be good for +2 wins this year. I think UCF, hear me out. UCF only winning 4 games last year was coaching malpractice. I get it. They had issues at QB. They had talent issues in places, but they were better than a 4-win football team. Gus had to coach them down to 4 wins. I think with the addition of Scott Frost and his staff, you see +2 wins on the schedule. Now, where will those 2 extra wins come from? I'm not ready to call that yet. But I do think they have a chance to start at 3-0 here, culminating in a win against Bill Belichick's North Carolina Tar Heels. It's going to be a good test. I think game 3 is the game that we find out what kind of football team UCF is going to be for the rest of the season. It's not to say that they can't continue to mature after that game, but we'll understand what kind of battle they have on their hands for the rest of the season after UNC. How much of an uphill climb is it for the Knights? Mark your calendar, September 20th could be box office for this program. It could be a date that when we look back on it is significant in the rebuild that is the UCF Knights under Scott Frost. You get this win, I think you got a chance to springboard your program forward. So what are the chances that that UCF starts 3-0? I'm going to put it at about 60%. I think we got pretty close to a coin flip. I think they get the first two. And then, going into game 3, I just think anything could happen in that game. 2 first-year head coaches at their respective programs. Obviously, it's not Scott Frost's first stint in Orlando. But the college game is a little different. Where I think Bill Belichick does have an advantage is with all this NIL stuff and managing money and divas and overpaid players. He's been doing that for quite a bit. As a matter of fact, New England had a reputation for not overpaying players with Bill Belichick as coach. So he knows how to navigate this landscape maybe a little better than some. And I think that pays off for UNC down the stretch. But early on, this is a chance for Scott Frost to establish some dominance here and send a message to the college football world that UCF, although they're rebuilding, they're not just going to roll over. It's important. Guys, this is an important message. UCF is not going to roll over. But if they can start 3-0, where do they finish after a 3-0 start? What kind of expectations will fans have of this team after a 3-0 start? We'll talk about that next on Locked on UCF. What kind of finish will they have after a 3-0 start? What is reasonable? What can be expected after a 3-0 start? Well, guys, quite honestly, I think 7-5 would not be unreasonable after a 3-0 start. If you can beat North Carolina, I think it's going to be a good sign that this team is going to steal some games that nobody expects them to win. Now, I know what you're saying. Mike G, where are those games on the schedule? I think they get the space game. They've never lost one. That's Houston, November the 7th. Rich Rod back at West Virginia, another home game for UCF. They haven't done well in this matchup as of late. I think they take that one. I think you get over the schneid on West Virginia. Now we're at 5 wins. Where are the other 2 wins coming from? Now, they play BYU. BYU will still be a pretty good football team, but they don't have Jake Retzlaff anymore. He has moved on. I won't get into his issues. But Oklahoma State, I think, represents an opportunity at the end of the season for win number 6. And maybe they can steal Cincinnati. They've got some really tough matchups on this schedule. They open Big 12 play at Kansas State. I'm not feeling great about that one, but I do think they could possibly get Kansas October 4th. If they start 3-0, there are multiple opportunities for UCF to get to 7 wins. 7-5 would be a dream start, I think, to the Scott Frost era. And I think at 7-5, you could really sell that, hey, we've got this thing headed the right direction. Commit to UCF. Come play here. My good friend Andrew Gluchov talks a lot about selling to players that you can go someplace where everybody else went, or you can come to UCF and blaze your own trail. I think this is the season where you can lay the foundation for players to say, yes, I want to go there and blaze my own trail. The UCF Knights, man, this schedule is tough. I mean, it's tough. Texas Tech is going to be tough. Baylor is going to be tough. Kansas State is going to be tough. BYU is going to be tough. UNC will be a dogfight. I'm not sure where I'm at on the Cincinnati game just yet. But this is a fun schedule. This is actually a pretty fun schedule for UCF. If they can get off to a hot start, and we have to account sometimes for other teams maybe not being what we thought they were to start a season. What is it going to look like for the Knights? Lots of things to look at there, guys. I like where UCF is at. Not a ton of expectations. Maybe people not expecting UCF to do much. But I do believe they have an opportunity to do something that a lot of people don't think they can do. sometimes when those expectations aren't high, you can surprise a lot of people. That's where UCF is going to be at. It's going to be a fun season. I think this season lays the foundation for what the Knights will be moving forward, and that's going to be a winning football team. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked on UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. I want to thank our sponsors again, GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, what time is it? It's game time. We'll be back at you guys tomorrow. As I mentioned, thank you for making us your first listen. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked on the Portal. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest in portal signings, rumors, all the going-ons in college football. You can find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked on UCF.